Nói qua. Anh cứ nói thế tất cả mọi người.
Right. Are you ready to some more? Yes. Okay, enough. No? This is writing, so you all need something to write with, pencil and paper. And there might be a little bit more dictation. Okay, academic writing, there's not a lot we can do in an hour, but I hope to give you a few useful phrases, a few useful expressions, and a few things, a few tips to help you organize your writing. I'm going to start with a very simple, very easy, very simple exercise. If you find it too easy, if it's too easy for you, don't worry, because it will get more difficult as you go along. So don't worry if it's too easy at the beginning. And maybe a little bit artificial, but it will get more complicated. Right. When you want to start writing, you often need a structure to help you going, not just grammar, but sort of a bigger structure to help you organize your thought and help you get thinking, get started. It's often difficult to start writing. So this exercise is to help you to get started, even though it's a little bit artificial, it can be very useful. Right, I'm going to dictate a few sentences to you, and I want you to write these sentences down. But I'm going to be using international English. I'm not going to be using Alex Ferguson English. This is about writing, not about phonetics. Okay. Yeah, just write these sentences down because we're going to put them together and join them up into a paragraph later on. But these are the sentences. Janet loved her father. Janet loved her father. Okay, next sentence. Janet didn't get on very well with her father. Janet didn't get on very well with her father. So Janet loved her father. Janet didn't get on very well with her father. Those have just arrived. I'm just giving you some sentences for you to write down. So you write these sentences down. We're going to put them together in a paragraph later on. So Janet loved her father, but Janet didn't get on very well with her father. Next sentence. Janet's father was very narrow-minded. Janet's father was very narrow-minded. Do you understand narrow-minded?
Yes.
Narrow-minded. There's another expression in English. We say blinkered, like a horse. You know a horse? A horse has got those things to keep it from looking. That's blinkers. It's called blinkered. So Janet's father was very narrow-minded. Next sentence. He thought a woman's place was in the kitchen. He thought a woman's place was in the kitchen. Was in. He thought a woman's place was in the kitchen. Next sentence. He drank heavily. He drank, I don't mean water. He drank heavily. He drank heavily and suffered. He drank heavily and suffered violent mood swings. He drank heavily. I think he probably drank whiskey or vodka. He drank heavily and suffered violent mood swings. Do you understand a mood swing? Yeah. So one day he's very happy, and the next day he's very angry. I think it's the alcohol made him very unpredictable. He suffered violent mood swings. Mood. Yeah, good mood, bad mood. Good mood one day, bad mood next day. Okay, next sentence. Janet was intelligent. Janet was intelligent and ambitious. Janet was intelligent and ambitious. Spelled ambitious, we say ambitious. Ambitious. Janet was intelligent and ambitious. Full stop. She wanted to do something with her life. She wanted to do something with her life. She wanted to do something with her life. And then last sentence, they often quarreled. They often quarreled. Quarreled. Do you understand quarrel? Had an argument. Yeah, they often argued. Fought. Quarreled. Q-U-A-R-R-E-L-L-E-D. Quarrel. Quarrel. They often quarreled. Right. Now you can have a look at your neighbour and see if you have the same sentences. Any words you don't understand, you can ask me. Any problems with the words or vocabulary? No? Got it all? Okay. Those sentences, they very clearly tell a story. They tell a story about Janet, but they're all just separated. So the story's there, but the sentences aren't linked. Now, this is an artificial exercise, but it's quite a useful one. I want you to write down these linking words. Can you write these words down? Although, next sentence, for one thing, next one, in addition, next one, for example, on the other hand, and then finally, as a result. As a result. I'll give you one more, what's more. Okay, now, next thing is, I want you to use these, any of those that you want, to put those sentences together in any way you want. Put those sentences together, get rid of the repetitions that you don't need, cut the things you don't need, and can you link them in any way you want using those linking words. And I suggest you start with although. So although, Janet, and then put them together. How long do you need? About 4 minutes? 2 minutes? 2 minutes. Okay, 2 minutes just to write it into a paragraph. So it forms a paragraph.
hợp với cái không phải rồi.
Okay, and maybe you can help me. That should be long enough. It's just to get us started. So help me do this together. Janet the father. Although Janet loved her father, comma, yeah, she didn't get on very well with him. Yeah. And I could put the although at the beginning, or I could say Janet loved her father, although she didn't get on very well with him. Okay. For one thing, yeah, and we can make it shorter. For one thing, he was very narrow-minded. For example, he thought all his places in the kitchen. I think you know this man. You might know this sort of man. He thought all his places in the kitchen. For another, what's more, he drank heavily and suffered violent mood swings. Janet. Okay, on the other hand, Janet was ambitious, strong-willed, intelligent, and she wanted to do something with her life. Now I can do two things here. I could say, on the other hand, Janet was ambitious, or I could say, Janet, comma, on the other hand, was ambitious. You could use either. I think Janet, comma, on the other hand, is more dramatic. Would you agree? On the other hand, Janet was more, that's more everyday, and then the comma makes it more dramatic. Janet, on the other hand, was ambitious, was intelligent and ambitious, and she wanted to do something with her life. You could use and she wanted to do something with her life, or you could use a colon. You know a colon? Yeah. The colon is not used very often, but it's quite good, it's quite dramatic, and the colon points to what you're going to say. Either a list of things, but it's quite dramatic. So Janet, on the other hand, was ambitious and intelligent. She wanted to do something with her life. Ah, very dramatic. Okay, and then as a result, they are quarreled. Yeah, so there's our paragraph. Now, as I said, it's a little bit artificial, because in English you don't have to link every sentence. And in fact, it becomes a bit boring for one thing, for another, for more. And in fact, when you're writing a report, you can use bullet points. So you don't have to link all the time. But this is just to get us going, help us to organize our writing. And don't forget, there are many other potentials. You could say, although Janet loved her father. What other word could you use instead of although? Although, or even though Janet loved her father. Despite, in spite of. Yes, this is going to be difficult. In spite of Janet's love for her father, or in spite Janet loving her father, use the gerund. Or if you're going to change it, say, in spite of the fact that Janet loved her father, she didn't get on well with him. For one thing, firstly, yeah. Or you could use, didn't know very well, hyphen, he was very narrow-minded. Because he was very narrow-minded, there's many ways of doing it. We don't have to be, this is not a recipe, it's just something to work with. For example, for instance, yeah, he thought of one's place in the kitchen. What's more, for another, in addition, he drank heavily. And with it, on the other hand, a lot of students think you have to say, on the one hand, the father drank heavily, on the other hand, Jan was intelligent. You don't have to use the two all the time. If you've got a situation where you've got a clear difference, he drank heavily, he was ignorant, he was uneducated, he was violent. On the other hand, you don't have to use both. The only thing you do need is two very different situations. The father drinking, ignorant, stupid, aggressive, Janet intelligent, ambitious. As a result, another one? As a consequence. Therefore. Yeah. There's thus. Thus is very academic and very important. And this little story thus would seem comical. It would be better for mathematics or something more complicated. Right, so there's our story. Now, let me just do a little bit more work on although, because although is really important, and it's often the first step in a sort of academic discourse. A lot of academic writing is like this, in that we have da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. There's often these two sides, and the although is important for linking this, but you've got to get it right. Can you finish this sentence for me? Write this down and finish it. Although Hanoi is crowded, and noisy, okay, so you need two different things. Although it's crowded and noisy, I love it. Although it's crowded and noisy, I feel very safe and happy here. You need two different sides. Let me try another one. Although English food has a reputation, although English food has a reputation for being, can you finish it? Be careful, because I'm going to look at what you've written after. Although English food has a reputation for being
ghastly.
That's not true. what does it have a reputation for? For being
Ghastly.
Ghastly. Yeah. Let me give you a word. There's a word that I'll give you two words today. One was huff. So got enough. Here's your second word. This is a great word. Bland. Bland. Isn't it a great word? If you're teaching language, often the word, the meaning of the word, is in the sound and how you produce it. So for example, tasty, it's called taste. That's where you get your taste. Bland, opposite of tasty. So bland is flat, no taste. So although English reputation has a reputation for being, although English food has a reputation for being bland and fattening, thank you very much, in reality, English food today is varied and diverse. Yeah. If you go to England now, you go out for food, you go out on the Friday, you go to Vietnamese, Thai, Indian, Nepalese, Chinese, Arabic, you eat everything. You don't have to eat English at all. So that's solved. Look, actually in reality English food is diverse, and we travel a lot, so you're starting to cook in an English household. You have English food, Italian food, Chinese, Vietnamese, not really so much with Thai. There's a lot of variety. Okay, here's another sentence. Although English women have a reputation, finish that anywhere you want, without embarrassing anybody. Talking about fashion.
Being trendy.
Huh?
Trendy.
Oh, how are you going to finish it then? Although that,
Classic.
For being trendy.
and then what happens?
In reality, they are old-fashioned.
Ah, right. I prefer the other way around. Yes, but that's the point. You need two sides. Let me give you a sentence here. Although English women had a reputation for being... Huh?
Classy.
I was thinking negative. Do you know what the visual equivalent is to bland? Bland is taste. In terms of fashion, bland is drab. Drab is no colour, no life, no shape. That's drab. D-R-A-B. D-R-A-B, drab. So two very important words, bland and drab. Bland is for taste, drab is the same thing but for fashion and for colour. Although English women have a reputation of being drab, in fact, London fashion, yeah, in fact, English fashion, London fashion can be very exciting. If you walk down the streets in London, you see every sort of fashion. And the fact is, a lot of fashions actually start in England. Punk, skinhead, all these great movements and that. Yeah, so two different sides of all those. Okay, right. Now, I'm going to give you a lecture. I'm going to give you a lecture. But it's going to be, you'll be very happy to know it's going to be a very short lecture. It's going to be a 3-minute lecture. Maybe 2 minutes. It's going to be very short. So don't worry. Now my topic is, I'm going to be talking to you about the future. And I'm going to be talking to you about the future that is projected by the Green Lobby. Green Lobby? What's the Green Lobby? Yeah, food. Activists. Yeah. The lobby is the entrance to a building, that's the lobby. And in any government, any parliament, you have a lobby where the politicians are arriving, and there's always somebody who wants to talk to them. Minister, can you help me here? And there's always somebody who wants to talk to them and to ask them a favour. And they're called lobbyists because they're in the lobby. So they're activists. And the Green Lobby is activating on the part of environment. So you get the Green Lobby. In America you get the gun lobby. What do they want?
To sell guns.
Yeah. The gun lobby want people to have more guns. It's true, they've got a strong gun lobby in America, and then you have the anti-gun lobby, and then you have the smoking, and then you have the anti-smoking lobby, and they're all there trying to get the attention of the ministers. So I'm going to talk about the Green Lobby and what they've been telling us about the future. And I'm going to be telling you about what the future is actually turning out to be. Now what I want you to do is I'd like you to take some notes. Just take some notes of the main points of my talk, and then I'm going to ask you to summarize my talk using all those. And for one thing, for another, what's more, whatever you want to do. So you have to listen to me as if I was a very important professor, and then take notes and then write a summary. So that's what we're going to do in the next 10 minutes. Are you ready? Where's my notes? Oh, here they are. See, so it's not a long lecture. When I was a student, the lectures used to come great big. I used to sort of try and count the number of pages as the lecture went through. Oh. Okay. Over the last 40 years, the Green Lobby has consistently predicted a global disaster due to a population explosion followed by mass starvation and diminishing resources. In other words, the message has been consistent that the population is going to explode and there'll be no food, there'll be no resources, and there'll be nothing to cook the food on if we had resources. So that's been the model that's been consistently projected by the Green Lobby over the last 40 years. However, in reality, when we look at the situation, things haven't quite turned out as they predicted. In reality, the population has grown, but the population hasn't exploded as predicted. As countries develop, the population tends to stabilize. Or at least population growth tends to slow down. So the population has increased, but hasn't exploded in the way they said it would. In addition to that, food production. Food production has actually overtaken population growth. So food production has increased at a faster rate. So the population has grown, but food production has overtaken population growth. The result is that there's more food now available than ever before. When you do get starvation, it's not because there's no food, it's because of distribution. It's for political reasons, not for environmental reasons. So food production has overtaken population growth. And then resources and energy. As resources become scarce, as a particular resource becomes scarce, we seem to be very, very good at finding alternatives. Either other sources or an alternative source. So for example, when tin became very, very expensive and scarce, we started using plastics and alloys and aluminium. So as resources become scarce, we find alternatives. We're very good at this. There's many, many examples. The result is that in real terms, food, resources, energy are as plentiful and in reality as cheap, in real terms as cheap as ever before. This does not mean that we have no problems in the future. We have real problems in the future, but they are not necessarily the problems that have been put forward by the green lobby. How long is that? 3 minutes? 4? Seems like a long time. Okay, now have a look at your neighbour and try and piece together my argument. And then when you think you've got my argument pieced together, can you write a paragraph starting with although? Well, break it down. First of all, have a look at your neighbour and see if you can repeat my argument, and then we'll attack the paragraph together. What was my argument? Let's say if we used to repeat together more or less what I said, just the main points. The green lobby has been predicting
A future disaster.
a big disaster because of caused by population explosion, which has caused mass starvation and diminishing resources, scarcity. That's what we say. and food scarcity, starvation. However, in reality,
Food production is growing faster than population
yeah.
explosion.
So the population explosion didn't occur in the same way. Food production has grown faster, or food production has overtaken population growth. Okay. And then next point is that resources, as resources become scarce, we
Good at finding
finding alternatives. So things haven't turned out as they planned. This does not mean
no problem.
we don't have any problems, but they are not necessarily, that's a good expression, they are not necessarily the ones put forward or posited is a good word, proposed, put forward by the Green Lobby. That's the paragraph. Right. Now let me see if you can put it together in a nice, tight, argued paragraph. Not very long, short, even shorter than my presentation, because I repeated things a few times. And this is how I would like you to start. Can you, dictation again, write this down. Although the Green Lobby has been predicting global disaster, due to a population explosion, followed by mass starvation, followed by mass starvation and diminishing resources. Right, can you finish that any way you want? Give you 1 minute, 2 minutes. 2 minutes, finish that. Do you want to look at my paragraph? This is my solution, but there's many others. Here's mine. You can check your spelling and any words you didn't understand. Although the Green Lobby has been predicting global disaster due to a population explosion followed by mass starvation and diminishing resources, the reality has proved to be very difficult. For one thing, the population explosion has not occurred in the same way as predicted. In addition, food production has actually overtaken population growth. Furthermore, as resources become scarce, alternative sources are found. As a result, food, energy, and raw materials are more plentiful than ever before. And I should have put in my little bit about, I'm not saying there are no problems, but they're not necessarily the ones put forward by the Green Lobby. For your homework, you could write a counter paragraph. You could start another paragraph saying, although James Banner criticised the Green Lobby, and write a counter lobby. Although he criticised the Green Lobby, in fact they are right in many ways. You can find alternative resources. You can find alternative sources for tin or plastic, but you can't find alternatives to water. And water is a commodity, and water is in serious danger of becoming scarce. Water and oxygen can't replace those. I'll leave that with you. Remember the although, and that's that idea of da-da, da-da, da-da. It's a very good way of getting started. Don't think you always have to say in addition what's more. You can use bullet points to break it up, but this pattern is quite useful. Now we haven't got much time, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on to some useful sentences. When you're writing an argument, when you're developing an argument, comparing and contrasting figures, facts and figures, there's some useful expressions that I found really useful in my own writing, and certainly as a teacher. This is the first structure I want to look at. This is for comparing two things. And this is an idiomatic expression in English. And you Vietnamese people know this very, very well, that if you have an enemy that's very, very big, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win. Very often the smaller person wins, as you know very well. So we say, the higher they come, the
harder.
The higher they come, the harder they fall. Yeah. And this expression is very useful, not only because it's very true, but da 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 da. You use this in a lot of situations to compare and contrast. The higher they come, the harder they fall. Here's some more. You know that they say that English people are very reserved. Have you heard this? Very reserved, very polite. It's not true. Remember, English people, the Beatles are English, Rolling Stones are English. Marianne Faithfull, who sang that, "Why'd you do it?" she said, she's English. We're not really. The aristocrats in the past, the aristocrats, the ambassadors, were always very formal. But they were the upper classes, but people have always been very informal. And in England now, if you go to England, you'll find that the culture is very, very informal. Everybody speaks on first names. My name's James. In my university, the director of the university, Professor Julia Goodfellow, she's known as Julia by everybody. So we're very informal. I think more informal than the Americans, which everybody thinks is the other way around. I think Americans are informal, we're formal. Not necessarily true. Even the royal family is getting less formal now. But anyway, they say that England is formal because it's a cold country, and if you have a cold country, you have cold people. So you put this together by saying the colder the country, the colder the people. Yeah, and I go to Brazil a lot, and in Brazil they're all very friendly because the hotter the country, the warmer the people. Yeah. So in this philosophy, the Eskimos are the most angry and hostile people in the world, and the Africans are the most friendly. I don't believe it, but this is what they say. Now, in terms of business, they do say that if you want to invest your money, and you want to make a lot of money, you have to take a risk. If you don't want to make a lot of money, but you want to be safe, then you won't make a lot of money. So they say the higher the risk, the higher the return. Or the lower the risk, the lower the return. And then you get more complicated ones, like inflation is a real problem. Why? Because if you have high inflation, it's very hard to plan, it's very hard to invest, it's very hard to... You try to build a building, it's twice as expensive next week. I was in Brazil in the 1980s, and the inflation rate was about 100 and something per year. And you go to the supermarket, and every day people in the supermarket putting prices on the goods. You just put the prices on top of the old price. Change the prices every day. This is a problem. The higher the inflation rate, the more difficult to plan ahead. And you could say the more difficult it is to plan ahead, or the more difficult to plan ahead. The higher the inflation rate, the more difficult it is to plan ahead, the more difficult to plan ahead. Okay, can you keep that sentence, those sentence structures in the back of your mind? Because we're going to use them later. Right, so that's one sentence, that's very useful. And here's another area that is really important, and it's people make lots of mistakes in this area. So let's get a few models that we can use. And look at that first sentence. The Americans lose nearly 3 times more working days through strikes than the British. Yeah. You're all a bit young, but in the 80s, the 70s and 80s, England was famous for strikes. Everybody said that England was the capital of strikes. The workforce is all going on strike, partly because of the big battles between Mrs. Thatcher and the mining unions. But in reality, England has fewer strikes than many other countries. So the Americans lose nearly 3 times more working days through strikes than the British. Or I could say the number of working days lost through strikes in the US is nearly 3 times higher than in Britain. Right, I want you to try and write a sentence using one of those structures about these facts here. Wine consumption per year per head, UK 13 litres, France 72 litres. Wow. So can you write a sentence about this? Can you start like this? Can you write this down? Wine consumption in the UK, wine consumption in the UK per person can you finish it?
Yes.
So wine consumption in the UK per person is 1/6 less than in France, or you can say is 1/6 that of France. Is 1/6 less than in France, or is 1/6 that of France? Or I can say wine consumption in France is 6 times higher than in the UK or than in Britain. So wine consumption per year per head or per capita in France is 6 times higher than in the UK. Fine. Here's another interesting fact and figure. Road deaths per 10,000 inhabitants, UK 1, France 1.9, Belgium 2. We drive on the left-hand side of the road. I don't know why, if that has anything to do with it. But yeah, Belgium 2, England 1. So can you finish this sentence here? The number of road deaths per capita, the number of road deaths per capita in the UK per capita, per head. So the number of road deaths per capita per head in the UK is half of that in Belgium, or is half, we can say just make it shorter, is half that in Belgium. And conversely, the number of road deaths per 1,000 people in Belgium is double, is twice that in the UK or of the UK. Right. Can you keep those sentences in your head? I'm going to ask you to use them in a minute. But before I move on to the next writing task, I want to give you some facts and figures I'm going to ask you to write about. And I'm going to, what I'm thinking about is this. I'm thinking about this. Paper. Paper. Have you ever thought about paper? How much do we use? Do you know? How much paper does the average person use in the world? Any idea? 1 kilo? 100 kilos? About how much? Any suggestions?
Per day,
A million tons?
maybe 10 kilos per day.
10 kilos. Anybody else? 5 kilos. Yeah, we don't know, do we? Okay. World average paper consumption per capita is 5 kilos, 15 kilos per person. Now this is quite a few years back. I think it's probably doubled by now because it's going up very quickly.
Over which period of time?
And per year.
Per year.
So the average paper consumption per person per year, this is last time it was 15 kilos. It's probably doubled now because I looked at this a few years ago. It's probably doubled that. But let's say, just for example, 15 kilos. Right. So the world average is 15 kilos. Can anybody think what the American average is? 30, double. Any more? 10. No. 15, 34, 60. Right. US paper consumption per person per year is 30 plus 100, 307. 307 kilos. The average per world is 15, maybe 30 now. The average American paper consumption per person per year is 307. Okay, UK. Anybody any suggestion UK? America 307, UK? 300. 80. We think it will be less, yeah? 90. 206. So America 307, England 206, going down. Spain 100. Spain 169. Yeah.
Is there a link between the consumption of paper and the development of the economy?
Yeah, when I started this talk, we didn't have any idea. But now that we know the world average is 15, America's 300, we know that the richer the country,
The more
paper
the more the consumption, the higher the consumption of paper. So we formulated a hypothesis, haven't we? We've got an idea now. So America 300, England, poorer countries, maybe 260, Spain, goes down, Greece 100, it's going down, yes. Brazil, it's about 50 or 60 kilos. Germany. Is Germany poor or richer? Richer, a bit poorer than America, as you can know. Now, Norway. Yeah, now Norway is 153, but Norway has a higher GDP than America. So American GDP is $50,000 per year. Norwegian GDP is $53,000, $56,000. So they've got a higher GDP, but they've got a lower paper consumption. And the same with Switzerland. Switzerland's got 53,000 GDP, but their paper consumption is less. I wrote it down somewhere, but I've lost it. Switzerland 144. So Switzerland and Norway have got higher GDPs, but they consume half. So we've got two ideas here. We've got two ideas, and this is very typical in academic writing. You have your first idea, you have your first hypothesis. Ah yes, the richer the country, the higher the paper consumption. And then you start looking at the figures, and yes, it's true, but not always. So you have to deal with two things. Although, there are exceptions. So let's have a look at those figures. Yeah, so this, my first hypothesis works very well for the first few. Right down here it's working really well. And then suddenly we've got a problem here because these guys are doing less but they've got a higher GDP. So it's thrown our argument out of sync. Now, it's very typical when we want to work with these sort of figures, when you're writing academic, to develop this da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. So, some very useful expressions. In fact, let's just try writing. Let's just try writing a paragraph now. I'll see if you can do it. Can you start like this? Well, let me help me here. What's the most shocking thing here? What's the most shocking thing? The US. Yeah, so when you're starting writing, the most obvious, the most striking, the most startling, the most shocking statistic is that Americans, yeah, can you give me a verb? Americans consume
The largest amount of
how much more? More than 20 times? The most shocking statistic is Americans consume nearly 20 times more paper than the world average. So that's your statement. So the most striking thing, the most shocking thing is this. And then you want to give some sort of explanation. How do we account for this? What's the explanation? Well, one reason is that the higher the GDP, the richer the country, the higher the consumption of paper. However, and then we bring in our next problem. Yes. However, this does not explain why Norway, which has a higher GDP, consumes, why which has a higher GDP consumes less paper, or you could say should consume less paper. Now this is a typical academic argument. Observation, interpretation, suggestion, problem, and then this leads us to a second summary. This suggests that other factors are involved. For example, why does Norway use less paper?
They use computers.
That's one reason, but apparently computers are causing more paper. Yeah, I tell you what it is. It's because of, I think it's attitudes. Yeah, so the French, the Norwegians, the Swiss, the Swedish, they circulate, they recycle. So it's to do with cultural reasons. And if you go to McDonald's, you see why. You go to McDonald's, you buy for your family, you come with paper and paper and paper and paper. Advertising. Okay, can you try writing a paragraph, making some sort of argument about this, and just to help you get you started, can you start like this? Dictation. Dictation. The most significant factor, or I could say the shocking, the most significant factor is that the Americans consume 20 times more paper. Right, can you finish it? So finish that with for one reason, and however, and then so you've got a 4-pronged argument. How long do you need? 4 minutes? 2 minutes? It's compromise. Let's say 4 minutes. Just write it down quickly, and then we'll have a look at my model. let's have a look at my solution, but this is only one way, just to get us together. So the most significant factor is that the Americans consume 20 times more paper per capita than the world average. Clearly there's some link between paper consumption and standard of living. Generally speaking, the richer the country, the higher the consumption of paper. However, this does not explain why Switzerland and Norway, which have a higher GDP per capita than the US, should consume nearly 1/3 less paper. This suggests that other factors involved, such as style of living. If you look at McDonald's, you realize McDonald's and advertising, you can see where the Americans spend their paper, why we're spending more paper. Apparently paper, our consumption is going up. Every year it's going up by about 10%. Despite computers, mainly because of advertising and paper. Okay, I think we'll stop there because you've been here a long time. I hope you found that useful. I said you can't do a lot of writing in academic writing. Academic writing is the most difficult thing in the world. It takes years of practice. I still haven't mastered it in my old age. But I hope you find that useful. So when you start writing, although don't link them all, use bullet points, don't have to be artificial. When you're thinking of an argument, the most striking factor, how do you account for this? This is one reason. However, it does not account for this, why they should be this. This suggests that other reasons are involved. And that sort of 4-point development is very, very typical in academic writing. It's a bit like the Marxist dialectic. You have one, something else, something else, something else. Okay, thanks again. I'll leave it there in case anyone wants a copy. Yes. That's complicated.
Hi again. Okay, on behalf of our teachers, staff, and students, we would like to thank you for your vivid and interesting lectures on the English language and culture. Once again, thanks for coming here. Hope that you enjoy your visit to HUST. And we have a small gift, bunch of flowers to you.
Thank you. Yes, please, yeah.
Students, please join us.
Anh là sao ngoài? Đây.
Được vâng. Ở đây cô là mọi người đi sẽ được đẩy. Sao được vậy? Bạn sẽ bị đẩy.